Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Emmanuel, and here we share real stories of life after death, visions about hell and heaven. If this is your first time here, I understand it might seem a little hard to follow at first, but I truly encourage you to try listening until the end. These stories are not just fascinating, they carry very important lessons related to Catholic myths. Before we begin, I kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel as we'll be releasing new videos every day. Your subscription will allow us to create better and higher quality content, and we do our best to ensure a satisfying experience for you. The story I'm going to tell you today is deeply emotional and intense, so I recommend having a pack of tissues nearby. Get ready for a journey full of emotions. Enjoy the story. My name is Peter, and I was born and raised in a small town in the southern United States. My family was always deeply religious. Every Sunday, without exception, we would gather in church. Faith was the foundation of our lives. I was devout, or at least I thought I was. My mother was the backbone of the family. Her kindness and love were unmatched, and my father, though stricter, was a fair and respected man. My two brothers and sister were part of a family that to the eyes of others seemed perfect, but as often happens, appearances can be deceiving. Everything started to fall apart when my mother passed away. It was a devastating blow. The heart of our family broke that day. But it wasn't just the pain of losing her that changed everything. It was the inheritance she left behind. My mother owned a small house in the countryside, a place where we had spent entire summers laughing and playing in the fields. When she died, I was convinced that house would be mine. I'd already made plans, dreaming of fixing it up and living there with my family. But things didn't go as expected. When my father announced that the house would go to one of my brothers, I felt betrayed and humiliated. How could they do this? How could they ignore my wishes, my sacrifices? It felt so unfair, like a slap in the face. So instead of talking it out and trying to understand, I let pride and anger take over. The arguments with my father and brothers grew more bitter. No one seemed to listen to me, and I didn't want to listen to them anymore. The anger consumed me. In the end, I decided to cut all ties with them. I changed my phone number, moved to a different place, and from that day on, I never heard from them again. For 10 long years, I lived in isolation, convinced I was right, that I had suffered an injustice. I didn't deserve this. My faith remained, but it was an empty faith based on rituals and appearances because resentment had corrupted everything. I didn't even know how they were doing. I didn't know that my father was gravely ill. All I knew was that I was alone, but I had convinced myself it was better that way. It was a day like any other, a sunny Saturday. Some friends and I had decided to have a picnic at a local park. I was no longer in contact with my family, but I had built a circle of friends with whom I spent my time. We were lying on the grass, laughing and chatting about various things. Life seemed calm, uncomplicated. At one point, I got up to grab something to eat. I felt fine, relaxed, but as I was walking back to the group, something completely unexpected happened. I felt a sharp pain in my neck, a sting. I touched my neck and immediately realized it was more painful than just a simple bite. I didn't think much of it at first, but within seconds, I began to feel a strange, swelling sensation in my lips, and my breathing became increasingly labored. Panic set in. I tried to speak, to ask for help, but no words came out. My friends noticed something was wrong and rushed over to me. One of them called an ambulance, but in the meantime, my condition was deteriorating quickly. My body began to give out. My strength was leaving me. I couldn't breathe anymore, and my vision became blurry, then darkness. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was no longer in the park. There were no more green trees, no sun, nor the cheerful sounds of my friends. Instead, I found myself in a place that seemed like a nightmare. Everything around me was gray. The sky was covered with black clouds, and the air was thick and heavy. Breathing, there was almost impossible, as if something was crushing my chest. The streets in front of me were desolate, full of ruined buildings, and there was an eerie silence broken only by distant groans and cries. I didn't understand where I was, but the terror inside me was growing. As I walked, I started seeing people, men and women wandering aimlessly with vacant expressions, as if they were trapped in some sort of trance. Some sat on the side of the road, clutching their knees, while others dragged themselves along as if their bodies were too heavy to carry. I approached one of them, a man with a blank stare holding a worn-out Bible in his hands. "Where are we?" I asked him, but he didn't even look up, barely whispering, "We're here for our sins. We destroyed everything for pride, for money, for things that don't matter." I kept walking, seeing more people in similar situations. Some prayed desperately, but it seemed like no one was listening. Others screamed in pain, a pain that couldn't be seen, only felt deep within the soul. There was a woman sitting under a broken streetlight, clutching a family photo in her hands. She cried silently, but there were no tears, only suffering. Another person, a man, paced back and forth in an invisible cage, shouting words of hatred at people who were no longer there. It was clear that this wasn't just a physical hell, but an emotional one, a torment that came from within, fueled by regrets and wrong actions. This place was a prison for those who had destroyed their relationships out of selfishness, for those who had placed material things above love, and I was one of them. Every step I took in that city weighed heavily on my soul. It was as if an invisible burden was crushing my heart. I looked around and saw people living in despair, but the most unsettling thing was that I understood more and more clearly that these people weren't that different from me. I had always considered myself a good Christian, someone who lived by the values of my faith, but in that place, every illusion I had created for myself collapsed. I remember seeing a man kneeling in front of a pile of money, crying and praying for everything to go back to the way it was. I approached him and asked what he was doing. He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears, and said, "I lost everything for this damn money. I lost my family, I lost my love, and now I have nothing left." I walked away because his story was too similar to mine. I realized that I too had let something as insignificant as money ruin my life, and not just mine, but also the lives of the people I loved. I stopped in the middle of a square, feeling the weight of my mistake like a chain around my neck. I collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by guilt. Every face I saw, every story I heard, made me realize that I was just like them. I had destroyed the most sacred bond that existed, the bond with my family. I had placed my pride and anger above love and forgiveness. The people here, including myself, were not condemned for a lack of faith, but because we had lived as if forgiveness didn't matter, as if love could be bought or sacrificed for a whim. At that moment, I felt such a strong pain in my heart that it seemed like I was suffocating again. "Please forgive me," I whispered, not even knowing who I was talking to. The remorse suffocated me more than the heavy air of that place, and I realized how blind I had been. I prayed, but not just to God. I prayed to my mother, my father, my brothers, and my sister. I asked for their forgiveness, even though they couldn't hear me. As I wept with my face in my hands, a blinding light filled the air around me. I lifted my head and saw him, the Archangel Gabriel. They're surrounded by an aura of pure light. His wings were white as snow, and his face was calm and compassionate. I had never seen anything like it, nor could I have ever imagined seeing such a thing. Yet, I didn't feel fear, only a deep peace. Gabriel took my hand with indescribable gentleness. His touch was light, yet it emanated a strength and peace I had never felt before. He looked at me, his eyes full of compassion, and with a firm but gentle voice, he said, "You have understood your mistake, but now you must see what you have caused." With just one gesture of his hand, as if drawing a veil in the air, he showed me a scene. It was like looking through a window. In front of me, I saw my family. It was a terrible scene. My older brother, whom I hadn't seen in 10 years, had aged terribly. His once serene and smiling face was marked by wrinkles of pain and exhaustion. I saw him talking to my sister, but both had the expression of people carrying an unhealed wound. I saw the letters they had written, never sent, the attempts to call me, their hands left unanswered on the phone. And there, sitting in a dimly lit room, was my father. His face was pale, ravaged by illness. He was sitting in a wheelchair, his head bowed, his hands trembling. Every day I saw him cry. His pain wasn't just physical. I knew that it was a pain that came from the heart. He cried for me, for the son he hadn't seen in 10 years. Every single tear was like a dagger to my heart. I couldn't bear to see him like that, so fragile, so close to death. Every day, he waited for a sign from me. Every day, he hoped I would return, and I wasn't there. I had let my pride distance me from the man who had raised me, who had loved me. I collapsed to the ground, sobbing like a child. "Please," I begged Gabriel, "let me go back. I can't let him die like this. I want to ask for forgiveness. I have to make things right." Gabriel looked at me with kindness. "You have understood the lesson," he said. "True love is found in forgiveness, and only through forgiveness can you find salvation. Go and heal what you have broken." I woke up suddenly, lying on the grass in the park. The air was thick in my lungs, but it was as if I had just learned how to breathe again. I was no longer in that gray city. I no longer felt the weight of the sin that had oppressed me. Around me were my friends, their faces full of concern. "You're back," one of them said. "God, we almost lost you for a moment." I didn't reply immediately. Their voices seemed distant, like an echo. My mind was still trapped between what I had seen and what I had understood. Someone had saved me with an epinephrine injection, and slowly my breathing was returning to normal. But inside, I felt an urgency I had never experienced before. There was no time to waste. What I had experienced was real, more real than I could imagine. Life had been given back to me, not by chance, but because I had to do something. I had to act immediately. I stood up on trembling legs, and without wasting time explaining, I left the park, almost ignoring my friends who called after me, and quickly headed home. Every minute felt precious. Every second that passed brought me closer to a destiny I couldn't afford to ignore. When I arrived home, I did nothing but grab my car keys. In my mind, there was only one thought: to see my father. The road seemed endless, yet I felt as if time didn't exist. As I drove, memories flooded my mind. I realized how I had allowed resentment to take control of my life, letting disputes over material things consume every bond of love I had. Every mile I drove was like a blow to my heart. Every street lamp I passed illuminated a fragment of regret. I thought about all the times I had chosen silence instead of calling, all the lost opportunities to mend a relationship with my family. When I finally arrived in front of my father's house, my heart was pounding. It was a small house, the same one I had known for years, but it seemed almost foreign. So much time had passed since I had last set foot there. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell. Every second that passed seemed to last an eternity. Then the door slowly opened. In front of me was my father, sitting in a wheelchair. He was no longer the strong man I remembered. The illness had consumed every part of his body. His face was pale and marked by pain, but it lit up slightly when he saw me. I couldn't hold back the tears. I knelt in front of him, holding a strawberry ice cream, his favorite. "Dad," the words caught in my throat, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." My body shook. Tears streamed down my face without restraint. My father looked at me, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, with a slow gesture, he extended his trembling hand and stroked my head. He didn't say anything, but in his eyes, I saw everything I needed to know. In that silence, in his simple gesture, there was forgiveness, the forgiveness I had been seeking for so long and had feared I would never find. The pain I had carried in my heart for years melted away in a river of tears. We hugged as we hadn't done in years, and in that moment, I understood that there was nothing more important than the love I had almost lost. I had let myself be consumed by resentment, by selfishness, but finally, I had come home in the truest sense of the word. Forgiveness had set me free. From that day forward, my life was never the same. I reunited with my father, and in the following days, I spent every possible moment with him. I wanted to make up for lost time, even though I knew it would never be enough. It was no longer a matter of quantity, but of quality. Every single day I spent with him was a blessing, an opportunity to mend all that I had broken. We talked about things we had never said before, shared moments I wished I could live forever, but I knew time wasn't on our side. The illness was slowly consuming him. And in the end, a few months after my return, my father passed away. His death didn't devastate me as it would have before. I was sad, of course, but I was at peace. I had had the opportunity to make amends, to ask for forgiveness, and say everything I had in my heart, and that gave me a serenity I never thought I could reach. After his death, I also reconciled with my brothers and sister. We all sat together, and for the first time in years, we talked. I didn't just talk to apologize, but also to listen. I listened to their pain, their sense of betrayal, and I understood how much harm I had done, not only to them, but also to myself. I realized I had spent too much time thinking I was right when, in reality, I was simply afraid to face my mistakes. The process of reconciliation wasn't immediate. It took months, and there were difficult moments, but the desire to rebuild was there, and that was all that mattered. Today, I live a life I never imagined, a life based on love and forgiveness, not fear and pride. I've learned that faith isn't measured only by prayers or words. True faith is reflected in daily actions, in the small choices we make every day, choices that must be guided by love for others, not by selfishness. I've learned that nothing is more precious than the people we love. No material possession can replace a broken bond. Now, I live trying to be a better person, to maintain the relationships I once destroyed. I have reconciled with my brothers and sister, and although the road has been long today, we are closer than ever before. Every day, I wake up with the awareness of how fragile life is and how important it is to love and forgive, because you never know when a moment will come when we no longer have time. I write these words with the hope that they may be useful to anyone who reads them. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't let pride, money, or disputes over material things distance you from the people you love. Love and forgiveness are the only true paths to salvation. If there's one thing I've learned from my experience, it's that no matter how far we fall, there's always a chance to get back up. You just have to want it. You just have to let love guide you. Before concluding, I invite you to visit our new website where you will find exclusive audiobooks to listen to anytime and anywhere. These audiobooks are designed to enrich your daily life, offering knowledge and support through everyday challenges. We add new titles every day, so I encourage you to stay updated by visiting the site regularly. Also, if you have any ideas or requests for new audiobooks you'd like to hear, let us know. We'll create them just for you. By supporting us, you'll also help us continue our projects to help people. That's why I invite you to subscribe, leave a comment, and if you'd like, purchase an audiobook. You'll find the website link in the description. Thank you in advance for your valuable support. Peter's story has come to an end, and I must admit it brought tears to my eyes because I often hear similar stories from friends or acquaintances. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? How would you react in his place? Thank you for listening until the end, and I look forward to seeing you in the next videos.